Hi, everybody. Welcome to our discussion about our fine arts program at Visual Arts Passage. I have gone to the source. I've recruited my friends and colleagues, Cassandra Kim and Raymond Bonilla, to help me have this discussion. And we're gonna walk through some things that are generally what we believe is the right way to approach your career with the gallery. Again, there's maybe a lot of right and wrongs, and it's different for everybody, but these are things that have worked for us, and I've seen work for other students. Before we get too far into this, I'm going to remind everybody this is a free event. Some things that we like to offer every Monday night, and if you could help us out, give us a like, that would be very helpful. Today, the focus is going to be on our pursuing gallery and our fine arts program. Anybody that has any questions or that wants to meet with me, if you go to visualartspassage.com/John, it will take you right to our scheduler, and you can schedule a time that works for you, and we can sit and have a discussion about our program and how it could benefit you. So here we go. Our fine arts program, we're just finishing up our second semester, and it's something I wanted to do for a long time. In fact, I met Cassandra 2003. I'm thinking that's right, somewhere in there, 2002. And I was doing it myself. I was going through and experiencing a lot of the things that we're going to talk about. And I know Cassandra has gone through those experiences, and so has Raymond. Raymond and I, he remembers meeting me at Spectrum, and evidently I snubbed him. So
it was actually a quaint conversation. It was great. You were really nice.
I'm sure I was very busy, but we have an argument about when we met, which I love. All right, so our faculty, I've already kind of introduced them, is myself, Raymond, and Cassandra. So Cassandra, up first, I want to show you some beautiful images and why you should be listening to Cassandra. Cassandra, you're welcome to jump in and say something about any of the pieces that you want.
This is actually, that last one was my favorite one because I restored an icebox store, and that one took a little bit more finagling, figuring out how to do that. So I'm all about how can I turn trash into treasure, and this was like the moment where I was like, I think I figured something out. So yeah, you just showed one of my favorite pieces.
Yeah, and I was joking before, this piece reminds me of Cassandra. It's like, John, you're doing it wrong, you need to do it this way. Hand on the hip, and there you go.
Mom pose.
Yeah, that's it right there. I love this stuff, and I love how well done it is, the skill and craft that's connected to all of it. The drawing in it is spectacular. The believability of of a group of pandas in dresses and suits and all of that, it all works, and there's never a question that couldn't be that way, and I think it's terrific. I just think the voice that exists in all of this, it's just incredible. I love it all.
I have a lot of fun doing it, so it's just really exciting that I get to keep doing it.
Well, it looks like you have fun doing it. Incredible. Oh man. So we'll be talking about, I'll just ask this question. Last year, how many shows were you involved in?
I forgot the final count, but I think it was 23 or 24 shows.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. And one of the reasons I've armed myself with bringing Cassandra here is exactly that, totally tied in to a number of galleries, into a workflow to feed those galleries. Cassandra, you pursued those galleries. I assume some of them pursued you, but you're making it all work. And that's what. How long have you been working with galleries right now?
I think that 2019 was really when I feel like that was the year I made a big push.
Okay, so it's been a fairly short run to really have a pretty amazing outcome. And again, everybody says it's a short run when success happens. I mean, I know a number of years, I know the Trader Joe's, working as an illustrator at Trader Joe's for 15 years, developing skill set, getting everything ready. But the actual application of chasing gallery and developing it and getting there so quick, that's one of the reasons, beyond the beautiful artwork, that it's imperative for me to find instructors like that, to find people that are doing it, actively doing it, that have just recently done it. It's extremely important. It's important, I think, in teaching the arts anywhere. My goal has always been learn from the people at the highest level that are doing it. And you fit that bill. And thank you very much for being so involved.
Thank you. I had a base of coming from Illustration Academy too, so that helped me set a standard of professionality.
Well, a lot of the process, and you're a process-driven artist. I know Ray's a process-driven artist. We're going to talk much more about that, but all of that and the skill sets that you learned from us and from others, you apply it in what you're doing now, even though it was kind of the illustrative process that you took on at the beginning. Raymond, I don't know what to say, except for
amazing.
Amazing, yeah. Raymond was, and I shouldn't say still is a very successful illustrator. He's won all kinds of accolades from New York Society of Illustrators and SILA, the Los Angeles Society of Illustrators, and has had a really great entry into the gallery world. And when did that start, Ray? When did you start your first gallery?
Around 2017. I started like 2009. I had I dipped my toe into the gallery scene, and then I kind of stopped and focused on illustrating. And then 2017 is really when I started to make a serious push with showing with galleries and creating relationships with them.
And were you comfortable doing that and illustration at the same time?
Yeah. I mean, I always had, as a, when in between illustration jobs, I would always work on gallery paintings. And that was the way I was in grad school, just doing the school. I went to the Academy of Art and university in San Francisco for grad school, and their illustration program was, and fine art program was almost fused together. We all hung out and took the same courses and things like that. And so there were different tracks, but everyone had there was a good contingency that had a dual mindset. And that just came from, our teachers, Bill Ma and Craig Nelson and the like. So I've always intended on showing in galleries. It's never like a thing that I, didn't want to do or anything like that. It was always just a given for some reason, just because of the atmosphere that I was in.
Well, I think that my training as an illustrator has helped me in my painting tremendously, but also the way of thinking about the illustration world has helped me in the way that I approach gallery and the way I think about gallery. Illustration, it's easier to maybe to define what your outcomes are, and it's this art director works at this venue and I need to show work that does that. There's a little bit more ambiguity to that in the gallery world. And I think that's one of the things that makes our program work, because it's there as a path. It's there to help you identify those things. You know, what is your work going to be? What is the genre going to be? And you can't, you know, I've always thought either emerging artist, either as illustrator or painter, it is their job is to become memorable to the people that you want to work for, or that you want to show your work at, wherever you want to show venue, wherever you want to show your work. And so developing something that's uniquely yours and fits the needs of what you want that outcome or that venue to be is extremely important. And I think that it's much more vague on the painting side than the illustration is pretty cut and dry once you figure it out. I'm going to steal this painting somewhere. I love this thing.
Just finished a larger version of that recently.
Oh,
So
That's awesome. Yeah, and I know you do more figurative work. I only showed this one and the very first one, I think. And this thing, man.
the light through the glass onto the stem, it's just chef's kiss.
thanks, Cassandra. Yeah.
I really think
yeah.
the Manet still lives at the end of his life on his deathbed. I think of that. And I
was
did
looking
this
at
and I was like, Ray, is everything okay? Okay.
Yeah. I think I painted that when I just became a dad. So it was
there was
lack of sleep, you know.
There was something very special about those Manet paintings. And as soon as I saw this, I originally went right there. It just put me in that. And I don't know, as a point of reference, beautiful painting. My stuff, I show almost purely landscape. So I like landscapes that have a hint, well, cityscapes, a lot of them, but the landscapes that just have a hint of, you know, mankind to it. The cityscapes obviously have a lot more. The pure landscapes, I always like to show something that has a little bit of human life to it.
Can you also talk about how big these are? Because I feel like people don't realize how big some of these pieces you do are.
This one's about 3 feet square. It's not huge. I mean, it's not tremendously. This one's 50 inches square.
Wow.
That's huge.
It's not that big. This was the James River. Did that, I think, in front of you, Cassandra, or at that time period. I did that in Richmond. And again, you know, these. Go ahead.
No, I said it was a good thing you didn't do it in front of me, John, because you would have never seen it after you would have purchased it. So,
well, a lot of this is locally Kansas City, and it's like I move things, I change things in my landscapes that are not direct. You know, my cityscapes, I'm always moving buildings and stuff around, but you know, there's that hillside. This is just outside of Kansas City. There's no mountains off in the distance, but it's just, you know, it felt like it needed them. You know, I'm not like you know, completely literal with the location. This one's pretty recent. This one's 4 feet square, also a good size piece.
So cool.
yeah.
Anyway, the thing I want to point out, I don't think anybody that came into this room that doesn't know myself or Cassandra or Ray would confuse each other's artwork. And each one of us has our own direction, our own voice, and it all looks like it's done by the same artist. That's really important. That's something that we really push and strive, help find voice and help people. Again, you know, it can be very confusing how galleries work. Galleries aren't that open, like, hey, come on in and show me your work. I mean, that's not that common. They have kind of a reputation as being a little difficult to communicate with, of how to approach, and we talk about that a lot. You know, one of the things that, you know, our program does is community reality of, are you ready to approach a gallery? I think that's honesty. Is your skill set there? Does this work all kind of link together? And I think that's the advantage of having mentors and having a community and support system around you. So find your path. These are all things that I just threw out there as bullet points. Your work represents you as an artist. I think I just kind of discussed that about each of us having, again, if somebody just came into the room, I don't think anybody could confuse each other's work. Thinking about, the different than the illustration world. An illustration world has you have a portfolio. That's the thing that represents you. It could be pieces that you don't have. You don't have to show originals. It's just images in a book or on a website. But in the gallery world, they have to be available. They have to be, if you have a conversation with a gallery and their interest, they're going to want to take some pieces from you and try with their clientele how it fits into the gallery. And plus there's something else, there's surface to think about. How does your work look in person? And that's a big deal. It's something you can really see, Cassandra, that makes all of those frames. I think that the frames are the decision makers for the proportions, right?
Totally.
Yeah, you come up with the frames first and tell us what you do with them, because I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, so for me, the frames kind of set the stage for what the work will be. So if I have a solo show coming up, I will first pick out all the frames to kind of understand how they'll all look together. And then from that's when the brainstorming happens as to like, what era will I set these paintings in? And are they more portrait, which is upright, or landscape, just based on what kind of frame I'm using. And I like the weird frames, and by picking the frames first, I can then just cut board to fit. And so I'm not stuck to certain sizes, but then also I'm saving a lot of money. So I taught myself how to frame. I taught myself how to repair frames. So a lot of people give me old frames that have been lying around that require just minimal repair and a little bit of elbow grease. And then I have something really unique and beautiful because it hasn't been seen for decades. And it just helps give my piece a more unique voice, because you're not going to find the same thing. With every painting is its own unique thing, framed with its own unique frame. They could be similar frames, but it's still the dings and scratches that I'm kind of fixing also give it its unique old look. So they go hand in hand.
So it's very much part of your process. I get as far as I paint the edges of my cradles black, and then people can decide if they want to frame them or not. And it's just just what it feels right for me, and it's just what I want. I know Ray probably has your own. Do you pick frames, or does your gallery pick frames, or?
Well, I am. Yeah, no, I'm very lucky that my kind of home gallery is also a framer and an incredible framer as well. And so I just basically paint the sides black. I thought that was my thing, John.
No, there's others.
And then
even before me, there's others that have been doing.
Yeah, well, we'll take credit. The John and Ray approach to, yeah. So then I hand it off, and I've learned a lot about framing through working with my gallery, because the gallery owner, Grace Mybom, she educates me on why we would pick certain frames and what the difference is between things. So, but beyond that, I have a certain thing that I feel works really nicely, but other than that, I leave the framing to the professionals. So
yeah, it's all about, it's about the look. It's also about, what you need with your frames, with the materials and things that you use. That's part of it too. We had that discussion, talk I did about Robert Heindel, and talked about, because he worked in so many mediums, like he used pastel and oil and on back of linen, all in the same painting. He decided that he had to put everything behind glass. And so all of his paintings, even his, the oil paintings that are predominantly oil paintings and oil pastel, and paint sticks are behind glass. And he said this really wonderful thing. It's like, I want the viewer to have the experience that they're seeing the reflection of themselves when they're looking at my painting. I just thought, oh man, that is so good. And such a great, also a great explanation of why everything's behind glass.
But I think it talks to the fact that unlike illustration, the physical presence of the work has to be considered.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It takes up space takes up air, right? It takes up space in an environment. So you, as a gallery artist, you have to be really aware and attuned to that. And that's not something that you just know off the, it's not common knowledge. It's something that you have to really work at getting towards. And it starts with people pointing that out, of course.
Who pointed it out to me was my father, not about my work, but about his work. He had his first major show in a museum here in Kansas City, at a local museum in Kansas City. And they produced a catalog. It's perfect bound. It's got like 60 images in it. It's beautifully done. And we're looking at the catalog, and he said, I said, what do you think? And he's like, the catalog looks great. It looks a lot better than the original work does. And I said, what do you mean? Are you unhappy? He goes, no, I'm not unhappy. It's just that I need to find, it was his first big show away from the illustration world. And he said, my work doesn't have the tactile quality to it and how it looks in person. I'm not happy with that yet. And he said that looks, and again, that was a really great statement. It looks better in print. I mean, that's what he'd been doing for the last 40 years, was working for print all the time. And that presence of the piece hanging on the wall is very, very important. You have to be, Cassandra and I have talked about it a lot. What varnishes to use, thinking about the life of your painting. Is it archival? You have to deal with all of that stuff. I've had paintings that dry, some shiny areas and flat areas. You got to find a way that you can conquer all of that stuff, so it feels good. And it's not just pure. It's not just the image and the color and the value, the drawing and everything that goes into that. It's also the look and feel and how it feels hanging on the wall.
Well, also in this digital age where so many things are done on the internet and through computers and stuff, when you have a gallery piece, that is an experience. And so people are purchasing to hang this emotive thing in their home. So like you have to think, like you were saying, you have to think about how will it be experienced in person and how is that different from how it's viewed digitally. Like it's important to have a very good digital image, but it's even more important that if someone's purchasing it to hang it in their home, that's considered. Like, what are you creating for them? What will be hanging in their house that they will want to keep looking at it for decades to come?
Yeah, very, very well said. And, the experience we have when we see things, we've all looking at famous paintings and books and you see them in a museum, and sometimes the experience isn't as good. Sometimes the experience is way over the top. Like, the first Bonnard show I saw, I had no idea. I had no idea. That stuff is so much better in original form. I'm a big David Hockney fan too. Love David Hockney's work. I see his work. I was amazed. It didn't bother me because it fit the sentiment of his work really well. But there was nothing to his paintings. The surface is very flat and very simple, but it fits the way that the design aspect of it. That's part of it. This is Cassandra, you said it well. This is more of an experience with the original piece. What I say by thinking of the body of work as a job interview. As illustration, the portfolio, it's everything that represents you. You can't talk your way around it. You can't. It consists. What makes up the contents of your portfolio it determines your success. It determines if you get jobs or don't get jobs. And so really like researching and understanding how that work, functions. Is it doing the job that the art directors are looking for? In this case, we're talking about paintings, and I think it's the same. Does that body of work do what you want it to do? Does it all link together? Is it going to seduce the gallerists and gallery owners or gallery directors that I'm going to be showing it with to get their interest? And so you really have to consider it being focused and being about you, being, a consistency that somebody could say, like, Ray or Cassandra, I could spot your work. If I saw a bunch of printed work and I couldn't see the credits, I know you did it. And that's kind of where you want to be. The audience aspect of it. Your audience as a painter looking for galleries, you better know what your opportunities are. You better really be looking around and figure out where other artists are showing their work, how they're showing their work. You got to do some footwork and really pay attention to what's going on. You can do that through periodicals, art magazines, gallery guides. I don't know, somebody help me out here. How you look for, you could do it through artists that you follow and where they're showing.
Social media
Yeah,
is
just
helpful. Sorry.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. So
Awareness.
beat me to, yeah, awareness, just being aware of the art world and where do you fit in that realm, because it's so varied and there's so many different types of art and applications of that. And so understanding who's working today, being aware of that and who they're working with is essential, because you can have the most incredible work in the world, but if nobody has seen it or the right people haven't seen it, then it's not going to get you anywhere. Being aware like that is part of the job.
Remember a very funny conversation of Gary Kelly having with a student at the academy, and he made the comment, because this work is very indicative or reminds me of this particular artist and derivative of that particular artist. And the student, and they thought they had a really good argument about it, says, well, I don't even know who that artist is. I've never looked at it, thinking that was the right answer. And Gary looked at the student and said, that's your job. You should know who that is. You're not aware enough if you don't know who that artist is, because it was actually somebody really well known. And he said, that's all of our jobs as an artist, is to be aware. So I thought that was a great lesson. Committing to a direction, especially at the beginning, it's so, again, you're not going to be all to everybody. You're not going to make everybody happy. You got to start by making yourself happy. You got to think of first the genre and maybe an aesthetic that is what you want to do for quite a period of time when you're getting started, because you're going to have to grow with it. Think about the gallery's needs. They're going to, they think of their gallery as real estate. They're going to put your work up on their wall in replacement of somebody else's that they could potentially sell. So it's kind of like a realtor's point of view. And to do that, they're making an investment in you. And they're making that investment based on the original body of work that you shared with them and what you've been showing with them. If all of a sudden you go off in a completely different direction and you bring them a bunch of work that doesn't relate, which they've been trying to pursue their mailing list or their clientele, that's going to be a problem. So consistency is really important. But that starts with you choosing that direction. And it better be the direction you want to do the most. I always say that talent gets outrun in the illustration and painting world by just determination of people that are really willing to work hard and invest themselves to get good at something. And that's who you're competing with. You're competing with people that love it, and they will put so much energy and so much effort to do it. You have to be willing to do the same thing. And if you don't like what you're doing, it's going to be very difficult. If someone told you that you could sell, whatever it is, paintings of cars or painting, and you hated doing paintings of cars, your heart's not going to be in it. And there's people out there that do paintings of cars at really high level. There's actually people out there that do paintings of about everything at a really high level. So
find your niche.
Yeah, don't be worried about not finding your niche, because somebody's already been there. Chase your visual voice. It's very, very important. I'll keep going here. This is something, there's some things in this page that I think are really important to point out, where I think a community can help tremendously, and people that have been down that road. Consider your options. Everybody approaches this, they're in their own unique place. It's different from the student left or right of them, or the emerging artist left or right of them. People have different timelines. They have different financial situations. They have, physical limitations. Location is a huge thing. And so you really got to consider how all of this works for you. Kind of jumped ahead to the general things that if you can't, physically can't make huge paintings, you can't make huge paintings. Just take it out. You can't. So your research, you better find out where you can do smaller paintings. If you can't produce, Ray and Cassandra and myself, this is our livelihood. And producing a lot of work is part of it, especially at the beginning. And if it takes you 3 months to do a painting, you're going to have to think about that a little bit. And maybe there's an outlet for that, where you can price that painting that, but you're going to have to, it's going to have more limitations than being able to produce a lot. This is, I think, something I've seen other artists. In fact, the Robert Heindel was the ultimate example. Finding opportunity aligned with venues and organizations. His love for dance, Bob, all the things that I've read about and talked to him about personally, he decided he wanted to be a painter when he was 44 years old. And he thought, well, okay, I don't know if I have enough time to approach like a traditional gallery approach, that somebody coming out of school might have that advantage. Maybe I'm too old for this. And I don't think 44 is, too old to do it by any means. But he did realize something. He was already a very notable artist, and what his capabilities of just starting out. My father had the same problem, of being able to do an incredible amount of work and stunning work, a really advanced work, for somebody starting out. My dad started out doing, painting in galleries when he was 50. Bob started at 44. I started when I was about 35 and made the transition from the illustration thing. Looking around of what's in your backyard, opportunities that exist, whether it be, a restaurant, whether it be an organization, a zoo, or a local theater. Heindel's was dance companies. And he controlled, and he did most of it, his whole career, controlled the venues, the shows, created all the relationships. He handled it beautifully. And he probably got there a lot faster than he would have if he would have just started with one gallery in one part of the world. But he went after it big time. But sidling with the dance studios, he instantly had an audience. He had people that were interested in the type of work he was doing. People that were supporting dance companies probably were fairly affluent, and they liked art also. They bought paintings of the things that they liked. It was very smart. And I've seen other opportunities happen and alignments, even on, you know, much smaller scale, that work really well for an artist. So you really got to be curious and think of like, well, Cassandra, talk about the Richmond Festival.
I through the gallery I work with locally, they threw my name in the hat for the Richmond Folk Festival, which is the biggest music festival in Virginia. And it happens every year, and they really like to highlight the artist. So they make a big deal about the artist that does the poster. And so I did the poster, and then I designed the beer can because we had a local brewery. So like I designed the beer can that goes with the poster, and then I designed the t-shirt and stickers and postcards. And it like then my image and my name was all over the city for a couple weeks, and I got a wider audience because, you know, the local gallery I worked with recommended me to the local company that handles the nonprofit festival. And, you know, I let my painting be auctioned off for charity, but that also put me in front of new people. So I feel like that was a great opportunity to grow my audience and be more familiar. And I already work locally with like independent card shops here. And so like it boosts my name there. So it's just little things that by working with people around you helps enhance you and tie in and find a bigger audience. So it's been wonderful that way.
And I think that's so perfect for you. And you identifying that is so great, because you could have been, you know, if you had like a one-track mind, like I only can sell work like this, like through track A, you would have never reached the amount of people that you're reaching now, and your collector base would have been so much smaller than, you know, and not nearly as large as it is right now. So I think that's important, like for students to understand, is that there's no, you don't being a fine artist is not like there's a path to it, and that's what this program's about. But there's also everyone has a unique circumstance. And I think that's what John and Cassandra are getting at. And it's your job to identify that yourself. And so I just wanted to point out that that's awesome. And like,
Yeah. And I think people have to be realistic about it too. You know, what are they capable of doing? What can they get done? And I think generally they can get more done than they think they can. They think that, and I think they don't. I think people don't generally see opportunity. I'm very proud of this, that I figured this out when I started painting. My first gallery came to me based on a project I did here in Kansas City. And I kind of approached it at the beginning because I didn't understand the gallery world that well. I understood the illustration world really well. And so, and I knew illustrators that did, you know, self-generated projects. And I thought, okay, I want to do paintings, and maybe they're for public places. And then Kansas City, Missouri just passed the 1% for arts tax, where any new building, any new construction, or a certain dollar level, they had to give 1% to the arts. And so I was thinking, well, who makes that decision? You know, I mean, that there's got to be, and that came from listening to NPR and reading the newspaper. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to start approaching the decision makers in that. And I found out the decision makers were the architects, the interior architects, the designers. And so that was who I approached first. And I had this idea of doing local Kansas City paintings as a regional painter, but with a different point of view than anybody's ever done. There was some kind of established painters in town, and they did specifically paintings of these parts of town. They all had, kind of something that was them. And I thought, well, I want something that's of me. And so I kind of went different places and tried to find maybe a more gritty, more something that people hadn't seen before or seen the city that way. And I did about a group of work. And right when I did that, I got a project with a hotel that I showed a bunch of samples that I did, and they ended up buying 16 large paintings from me. And the largest one was 8 foot square. So a really big painting. And I had never done a painting over 3 foot square at that time. And I had to do a lot of figuring out how to make things look the same at scale. Painting large, that's pretty much the difference. Keeping the inverse but up in scale, the material aspect of it. But I had a whole bunch of studies. They ended up buying all the studies too. And so at the end, there was like 30 pieces of art they bought from me. And that's how I kind of figured out how to do what I do now, and close to what I do now. And the city the Kansas City Star did an article on the newspaper, did an article about it. And it was in the Muehlebach Hotel, which was the Truman Summer White House. It's where he spent, like, his Camp David was in this Muehlebach Hotel. I'm really proud to say that's where my daughter got married too. And it was pretty cool because the backdrop was all my artwork. There was artwork all over the place.
That's pretty wild. That's pretty wild.
It was kind of fun.
Hopefully you weren't in the too many wedding pictures with you just, adjusting your artwork in the background. Yeah.
Pointing, being like, see
Yeah,
that?
this kind of thing. Yeah. No, not too many, Ray. But anyway, it was an idea that I had, that I worked really hard to figure out what those paintings would be. And then I actually made calls and started going out and visiting architects, which they thought was very different, and they really enjoyed it. This was like, well, this is different. I've never had an artist call me to come show me his work, but it worked really well. And because of that.
That is brilliant. That is true. You should be proud of that. That is a brilliant idea, to realize the opportunity in that.
Well, because of that, I had local gallery call me and try moving forward to them. Since then, I kind of progressed. There's a local gallery that I didn't know much about, working with a gallery at that point. And so I learned it was it wasn't a very prominent gallery in town. So I learned all the pitfalls through them. And it turned out that I didn't get along with this gallery all that well. And had another gallery here in town that was the premier representational gallery in town. And I was represented by him until he closed, and signed with the gallery that I'm at now with Eva, which Eva Reynolds was one of our guest speakers last semester. She came in and, talked about what she does as a gallery owner. Every semester I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But connecting where you can listen to the point of view of how a gallery operates. And there's all kinds of different types of galleries too. And you need to be aware. I mean, there's tourist galleries, there's collectors galleries, there's blue chip galleries, there's galleries that, only will get very focused and, just focus on Western work or figurative work, whatever it might be. So you got to do your homework. And again, that goes right down to the bottom here. Establish what you want your outcomes to be. And you got to be realistic about it, and you got to do your research. I
do want to say real quick, just in talking about Eva, having her come in, what was really special is, John and I didn't even realize we were setting this up so beautifully, that we've been talking about things that are important patterns to pave your own path to get where you want to go. And to have her come in at the end and just basically piggyback on what we've been discussing all semester, and then to give an opportunity for students to say, what do you like to hear from artists when they email for the first time? What do you hate to hear from artists? And just understanding after getting all the information and then having them support information that we've already given, and giving some insight to what it looks like behind the scenes of simple things that you don't even think about would be a pet peeve. But then when you think about it, you're like, oh, that is kind of rude that I didn't learn the gallery's name when emailing them, but I expect them to look at the stuff I do, just simple things like that. I think were really exciting to have supported and explained. And I think that's really unique here.
Well, I think the thing that needs to be pointed out too, I think anytime you put fine arts in front of anything, or I'm doing this as an artist, business acclimate, everything's kind of thrown out the window. But the galleries, I worked as what was called, in the illustration world was called as a commercial artist for a long time. The galleries are every bit as commercial as the illustration world, if not more so. Their job is to sell. And it's their one and only pursuit. I mean, I've had great experiences with them, and where they show good artists and they're really into it, but they're really, the ultimate goal is to move artwork and sell artwork and help build that career. I think a good gallery will really consider the careers of the artists and be very beneficial for them for their growth and development. Again, this is a path. And what I like about our illustration program and our character design program, what I wanted our fine arts program to be, the curriculum to be, is a path. And the outcome is to work in the industry. Wherever you are, and again, everybody's different, whatever skill set you have, I think that we address your needs going forward by helping you focus on what you need to be focusing on. And we do it this way. This is a gallery brief that kind of this is our fine art brief that kind of runs through the whole program. And the first, we'll pull bits and pieces out of it for each class. The first thing Cassandra and I do in our first level class is to help people come up with a working process, establish, find these artists, these muses, and look at the body of work they've produced, look at who they made it for. I don't want to get too far into the gallery pursuit in the first class. I want it to be more about getting a handle on a working process and start creating that body of work that you need, that 15 to 20 images that you're going to need to pursue the galleries, to show your work and have them available, but start connecting them together. Process is huge. So this is the illustration process. This is the process. This is really, when I created this for the Illustration Academy, it's the act of making a picture with an art director. So the difference is you're defining your outcomes as a gallery painter. And so you have to be the art director. I've never shared a sketch with a gallery director. I've never shared any process with them before. I've only shared finishes. And they expect the finish. They expect it to be in a certain vein of a certain subject matter or a certain genre. So I thought about, with the gallery approach, taking the ideation process out, but it's still there. My ideation process is, looking, going and to certain locations, shooting photo reference, doing on-site drawings, studies, investigating what I want to paint. And it's more of a visual thing than it is a cognitive thing. The cognitive, the mood and emotion that happens in the sketch work. But there's really good narrative painters. There's people that do fantasy painting. There's people that are great storytellers with their gallery work. And so having an ideation process can be very, very helpful. The thumbnail process, learning to get everything right before you commit to making a finished piece. And I think it's even more important because this isn't going to be done digitally. This is going to be a piece of art that you can pick up and hang on a wall. And our focus in our gallery is not, it's two-dimensional. It's not, we're not sculpting and we're not doing ceramics. We're painting. And it could be, very much could be three-dimensional in the aspect that a collage is, but basically things that are hung on walls. And in doing that, knowing where you're going, having some kind of process. It doesn't have to be this process completely. This is the process, I think, that is more about the drawing and painting aspect and dealing with composition and value structure and all of that. But I've seen artists pick up things and drop them on the floor, objects on the floor to start looking at composition. And they do it repeatedly until they find something that visually works for them. That's a starting place. Really good art. Fred Ottness did that. Really great illustrator that became a painter. Very sophisticated work. That was part of his process, just an exploratory process. I've seen artists that have a process of discovery, of removing things. Knowing where you want to go in most cases and controlling it will help you immensely. Again, I mentioned having to produce a large body of work, having to produce, fairly quickly. Having process makes everything easier. And it makes the artwork better because you get every step right before you go to the next step. You nail down your composition, you nail down the dark and light pattern that exists on the page. And when you go to do the painting, you know exactly where you're going. So it becomes exploratory. I don't like doing color studies because I like that being part of what I explore. I like just like having a conversation with the material and applying material and color to the design work I've already done. And it causes me less, I fail less doing that. So process, please, Ray, Cassandra, anything you want to say about process, but
I think it just goes to I mean, you covered sort of the general overview of what the really solid approach is. And, this is something that you're going to be, as an artist, experimenting within for the rest of your life, and understanding what works for you, what's the best for the what your idea is, your concept of what you're working on, I think just requires, again, going through the process and also researching. It just goes back to what we were saying before, researching other artists and seeing how they work and understanding why they work the way they do to get the results that they get, and how does that fit into what you want to do, so on and so forth. So because you might, like you were saying, John, like a thumbnail for illustration, like when I'm doing an illustration, if I don't start with a thumbnail, then the illustration is not getting done, right? It has to start with the thumb. There's no because I'm wasting my time if I don't. And so, however, with my gallery painting, I start with the photo reference, and that it takes the place of like a thumbnail, and I'm reacting to that and understanding that works, why that works better for the type of work I want to do is super important. It's not like a one size fits all. And that's the great thing about us as, having being in a curriculum with all sorts of different like artists that are working at a high level, is that we all have the same approach, but the way we do things is different and unique to ourselves because we have different interests. And when you understand that, makes things a lot more exciting for you because you realize there are many roads to Rome.
Yes. Well, and I think you're totally touching on really what's important, and I think really special is we all have our own personal processes that get us to the endpoint, and there's very similar aspects to it. And what our job is, we will show you what works for us and then help encourage and help you find what works for you. Because what's going to work for the student that is creating a body of work based on what they're trying to create can be very different from what works for me. And it's just identifying those key moments in your process when they're hitting something special that's important for them to hold on, and then to be able to move on to the next step. And I think that that's really big, because when you're learning your process, you don't always realize that you're figuring things out, and it's from an outside perspective, it's often easier to identify. So having mentors that help see that, and then other students seeing that and celebrating that, like, I think that's what really kind of gears up all the energy, is having lots of eyes looking at what you're doing and being able to look at something, because everybody's painting has an ugly part. Like when you're working on it, it can be ugly for a bit. But if you're used to your process and you understand the ugly part of the painting, that can also be really exciting, because you can see like it's about to get really exciting, and to like mark that moment and show that that's a really good place to be, and being able to identify that's huge.
Yeah,
Well,
and I think us, we will. I mean, you are shown like that's. I don't know if that's always taken for granted, because I know like the beginning of my education, that wasn't necessarily the case. Where in terms of demonstrations, like, I mean, we're open books, so like there's no sort of like uh Fort Knox level secret that we're doing, to create our work, and we're going to show you how we do it. And like I'm a process junkie, so like I'll show you what I do on one painting and something different from another painting, and what 10 other artists do, and why it's important, and how you can tweak your process to get into that. And I think also seeing the fact that like when you do a demo, Cassandra, it's like people seeing you actually do it brings so much more insight too than just seeing what the final product is, because you realize that it just didn't exist all of a sudden in the world, that it had to be worked on in order to get to.
There's
The same
no
thing with
uber
yours, John.
secret magic solution. It's just work.
Yeah, I wish there was. I wish there was.
We did
My life a lot easier.
We did a lot of demonstrations at the academy, and we do a lot of demonstrations. How many have we done in our class? We've each done one so far this semester, right?
Mhm.
Or parts of pieces in our classes. I remember, some of the long, arduous demos that were done at the academy. People have been working all night on their pieces, and then they come and they're watching this demo. And I was having this conversation with a group of the instructors. It's like, well, maybe we should alter it. My father's response was, the demo, they may learn more from the interaction of the critique of their own work going through the process, but the demo verifies it can be done.
Yeah.
I think that's really,
Absolutely.
really
Yeah.
Absolutely.
so I'm going to show some, like Ray, here's a process junkie. I am myself. This was a shot that started purely with photography. A shot I took with my iPhone out the car window. This was a demo I did for illustration isolation. I just pulled these. Part of the process, take it into Photoshop, start manipulating the photo. First thing I do is flip it to black and white, because in grayscale, I don't confuse color. I can see shape easier. And so I start playing with the shapes, and obviously this is a very different thing than this. And then I start moving things around. I took all the trees out over on this side. I added dark down at the bottom, very different than what was on that original photo. It was a starting place, a place for me to see a lot of options quickly to make it better. But then it gets to drawing. And then no matter where I am, whatever I say, okay, I got something pretty good, I start doing 3-value thumbnails. I start explaining in shape what I really want. And then in my before the last drawing I do is I draw everything on my substrate. and I'm thinking about the design of my shapes. I'm, moving things around still at that point up in scale till I get it exactly what I want. And that was the little painting that I did. That's, this whole thing was a hour and 45 minutes or 2 hours from start to finish, but I don't like doing a demonstration, seeing me put paint down. That doesn't answer any of the questions. Like, what are you painting? The composition is a lot more important than the material at a certain point. And so trying to show how I get to that composition. And this is one of my father's, this is like most direct process in the world. He painted from memory most of the time, the last 15 years of his life. And so he didn't look at very much reference. And so he would just draw these thumbnails and do the painting from the thumbnail. That's process. That's a little, all of his abstracted landscapes, these things that were marvelous, that looked like, this is a 4-foot square painting. It came from a little 2 square inch thumbnail. And he would traveled a lot. He looked at things. He took photographs. Some, he stole my photographs a lot. Said he didn't use reference, but I really need to borrow that. But he would be influenced by him in a very organic way. He wasn't tied to the reference at all, even when he used reference. It was more.
I remember seeing your dad work on one of those from a thumbnail. Like, he had just this little thumbnail and he taped it to the side of his board, and I'd watch him look at his thumbnail and put those parts in that he figured out
Right.
value wise, and then just blow us away with this landscape. And I still think about the way he works, and I keep that tucked in my head because it's brilliant.
Bill Sienkiewicz at the Illustration Academy, great famous comic artist, great illustrator, was watching my dad work for the first time, and he looked, and he's like, "Oh my God, it looks like he's rendering a piece of reference," but it's this little thumbnail he created out of his head, and he had solved all the, my father's thing was, it's like, if I did it at 2 inches square, it's going to work at 4 foot square if I keep the proportions the same, the dark and light pattern, and he lived in and created work with this one thing in mind, and that is a picture's a collection of shapes, and that you can control everything on the picture plane. Now he could do that masterfully. This is an example of a piece of photo reference that I took that I was really interested in, those trees. This is a demo. So not my favorite painting, but this was my thumbnail from this. And that was with finished painting. And again, another short demo. Cassandra, I have some things of yours that start with thumbnails, and then you show, there's the finished piece, but you show some process along the way in making these, which I think is so great. Now, were these the first drawings you did?
Yes. For this one, I just immediately, I'm basing it on a Renaissance painting. I immediately just started working out the ducks, and then I taped the canvases together so that I was having the landscape go across, even though they were going to be framed separately.
Cool. And so this is just some of the, blocking in, and, I know you do kind of acrylic underpaintings and finish in oil. And then there's the finishes in the frames. How cool is that? This thing blew me away. This is really recent.
Well, and I always need to have the thumbnail, work back to front, block everything in, and then I start rendering as I go. But there was a couple decisions I made a little differently. I decided it needed bamboo because there were pandas. So then I had to put the bamboo behind the male panda bear there, things like that. But in general, everything stayed where it was going to be, and I made a better bench.
But of course, they're chewing on bamboo. I think it's awesome.
The only way you're going to get pandas to sit that long is to feed them. That was my thought.
Right.
Raymond.
Yeah. So I this is one of the ways I like to work, which is essentially I always start with a photo reference, and I then
Where do you get your photo reference, right?
I take it myself, usually on from my cell phone, or a an SLR that I have. Usually my cell phone's the most handy. It's the camera I always have with me at all times. So it's really easy, and it's high res, and high enough resolution for me to work from. And
the landscape that I shot was with an iPhone 11, not near as good as what they are now, but I was driving like 80 miles an hour with my phone out the window because my wife was so mad at me for stopping so so I was like this. So I risk our lives by, taking pictures while I'm driving.
Oh my gosh.
But I was in top of Wyoming. There was no cars. So just out there on an island by myself. Sorry to interrupt, but there was so much information
I'm
in that iPhone.
Right. Yeah. And it's, you're going for it. I think it's the way I work is really similar to the way you work, John. It's like you're going for kind of a feeling. And the reference is is a branching off point. Like my reference doesn't look at all like my finished piece. It's something I make a point at showing people in my class, the students in my class, that is like, this is where I start. I show them exactly how I build my reference. But after I build my reference, I always do a color study. And then from the color study, it basically gives me, it's a dress rehearsal for the painting, and to see if this great idea that I have is actually a pretty good idea in painting form, because it might just not be. And the color study will confirm it. And then once I'm confident about it, I'll go in and I'll paint it. And so these few paintings are basically a process that I use where I start with a monochromatic underpainting, and that's just so I can focus on my shapes and values and really nail those down, get them exactly the way I want them, build up paint texture, talking about surface quality and things like that. And then once I have that, I can then focus on the color, and where I can just focus on color relationships and stuff that I would have figured out in my reference and my color study, and finish the painting. And this way of working is really fast too. So I was up for those last couple of paintings. I think I did the last two I did together for I was at a group show at the LA Art Show with my one of my galleries at Ben Gallery, and so I had to finish those pretty quickly. I was on a really short deadline, so I was able to get them done using that.
What I find really interesting is that you didn't go very far to find your reference.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I went to the bedroom, the closet, and then
Yeah. People always tell me, I remember I had a student one time, not in this class, but I used to teach at a university. They told me, I can't, I don't live in a place where there's inspirational imagery. And I went and I showed them. Yeah, I showed him the corner of my kitchen, that right before I cleaned it. And I was like, it's right there. You just have to look for it.
Or I think of the one of your trunk with the groceries in the trunk, where I can see you, like, your wife's like, hurry up, bring those groceries in. And you're kind of like, I like what's happening right there.
Were you there, Cassandra? Because that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. So, a lot of these, the cool thing, I love showing these types of process pics because, my work, I love color and I like using a lot of it, and I like combining different color schemes with things. But every color at the end of the day really doesn't matter in my work in terms of the hierarchy. The most important part of my work is the value. That's something that I'm always emphasizing with students, and just showing them that a lot of times in their work, most of their problems are value problems, not color problems. And so once they start correcting their value problems, it's no surprise that the color all of a sudden starts to get better, even though the palette didn't change at all, the approach didn't change at all, just that the values got better. So.
That's interesting. It's kind of funny thinking, well, maybe I'm doing this wrong, or maybe I'm doing it right. Ray went into the next room and got his reference. I had to go 4 states.
Driving 80 miles an hour, so the
Right.
police don't catch you.
Freaking his wife out.
Right. So, but I do a lot of editing with my reference, just like John does. I mean, again, it's a starting point. The painting, I always paraphrase the great painter Scott Christensen, where he says, my goal is not to show you a Census Bureau approved representation of a scene, where every tree and mountain is in the perfect place. My job is to show you what it felt like to be there. And
yeah,
so when you're chasing a feeling, like I don't remember, there were all these other little buildings up to the top, and the people weren't as spaced. They were spaced kind of much differently, and I didn't remember that. I remember them being a certain way, and the way the light fell through. All of that stuff wasn't in my reference. I had to kind of put that together with a whole combination of things, drawing studies and value studies and color studies and so on and so forth. So
constructed beautifully. Love it.
Thanks.
All right. So in that first class, we're really focusing on getting that process and getting you to commit to a direction, what's the genre, and get you started. And then as you develop through the program, right, you should probably talk about this more than me because this is your class, what your I know you're continuing to make more work and you're continuing to develop that voice, but you're starting to dig in a little bit deeper.
Yeah, I think that it's, the first class is that you and Cassandra teach, and now Cassandra teaches, is that is discovering kind of who you are and how you work best. And the students that I inherit that are coming from the first class, the excitement level is super high, and they're realizing what they are as who they are as artists, and that journey continues, especially when the focus is on putting together a body of work. Because the thing is with your work as a gallery artist, as a fine artist, is that you can't have it's very difficult to be known or have gallerists or people or collectors identify who you are as an artist when you have kind of one-off pieces, like you do something like portrait in a certain style, and then the still life in a completely different style, and it looks, they're beautiful pieces, but they don't relate to each other. It's very, very hard to kind of get lost in the weeds in that sense. And so nailing down what it is that you like to do and finding the common thread through things and doing and then not only considering finding that, but understanding how that exists across multiple pieces, and understanding how the pieces look together is an extremely important part. Because Cassandra, John, I mean, both of you can definitely speak to this, is that how the work looks together can affect how people look at the individual piece.
Right.
I think that
stands in for you, like I'm always saying, how do these look on a wall together? If you hung them next to each other, do they tell a story? Because you're not there to tell the story, your work is.
Right. And you're creating an experience, and again, it's just you're establishing a visual dialogue with the viewer on a visual level, but also a physical level, and understanding how that plays a part is super important. And so in my class, it's all about understanding how to sort of narrow all that stuff down and get used to creating bodies of work and within a given process for yourself. And certain students have a set process, and others have processes, but an interest, and have committed, but understand that okay, I made a bunch of work like this. I really, I don't really I like figures, they're cool, but I like the environments more so than the figures, I realize. And this is the type of stuff you don't understand until you actually do the work.
Right.
And so, the second class I've been working with the students to a lot of them to identify that, and also identify who they are as individuals. You know, it's like, if you like working like this is here are a couple of artists that work that way. How do they make it work? And, you know, what do you think about that? You know,
I
how
have
do you
to,
respond to that?
I'm going to interrupt you and say that there's not a better individual that can help you with awareness of like past artists, current artists than Ray.
So true.
He is very, very aware of what's going on, what's gone on. And having somebody, you know, I always thought this, this is one of my dad's really simplified statements. He said, you know, you go to school to study literature. I know they're telling you who to read, you know, because there's great writers. They're telling you who to read. When you go to art school, they should be telling you who to look at. And having that wealth of understanding of what's been done and what's being done now is critical, and being exposed to it. And I think that's one of the things we do really, really well, is we align people with artists that they've never heard of that are doing what they're trying to do. I know.
And multiple times, like if I had $1 for every time you show, you know, you look at a student's work and it's like, I know you, and they're frustrated or something that they're trying to attempt to do, I get a certain look, and you expose to them, you know, another artist that's working like this, and then give insight into how they did it. All of a sudden there's this like light switch that goes off. It says, oh, they're human just like I am. They had to figure this out. This wasn't kind of this natural occurrence. They just didn't dream it up out of thin air, and it just appeared. And so I think, you know, what the deep dive, you know, showing how we work and showing how other people work and looking at other artists and being in a community that does that, and while following a path, really helps you get from a consumer of this great art to a producer of art. And I think that that's a, you know, a mindset switch that has to happen. And you've got to be around, you know, like-minded individuals and people that can help guide you through that, because not to paraphrase your dad, John, you know, your influences can get you in trouble, you know, if you're not careful. And so I always think about that when I telling other people, you know, who to look at.
The reason I left this up here is because you got to have a starting point. And this is just, you know, the beginnings of resources that we throw out there at the beginning. It's like, if you need to find artists, this is a good starting place. And then we continue to fill in individually with those artists that we know that you're looking for, that do what you're trying to do. This is just things that are continued on in that second class, that you keep moving in that direction towards the finished body of work. Our last class is it's going to, we haven't run it yet for one. But the goal is, and the goal with any of these classes too, you know, this whole program, if you went through all 3 classes, is only 30 weeks long. They're 10-week semesters. These classes, people can use them as their art school, are repeatable. And many of the students repeat over, and they do it in our illustration program. They do it in our character design program. You're doing push-ups and sit-ups. You're trying to produce in a direction and end up, you know, your ultimate outcome is that body of work, and you keep doing it until you're ready. And so many times people repeat these classes. But when you get into this information, it's going to become, there's soft skills involved. As I mentioned earlier, you are a one-man shop or a one-person shop, that you are, you're in your own business, and you're interacting with another business, and they have a specific business model. You gotta figure all of that stuff out, and you got to learn to work within what's already there. again, you can take things out on your own. You can use crowdsourcing. We discussed that, how to crowdsource, how to kickstart a project, that type of thing. But the general gallery approach, it has rights and wrongs to it. And so figuring out what those things are, figuring out what works for you. When I was having that discussion with Troy Heindel about his father, Bob referred to the other side. He said, people buy the artist as much as they do the art. And so some of those soft skills, your communication skills, those types of things, you really need to consider. And he called it the showbiz aspect of it, where you go to openings, you communicate with people. Cassandra, I know that you go to many of your openings or several of them, and that's a big part of it. It's a big part of it. Be able to talk to potential buyers. Anyway, there's a couple more things I want to show here, and that is kind of the path of how we do this, the mechanism of how we do it. These are all structured into 10-week program, 10-week semesters. Our next semester's July 16th through the 17th, so we're still enrolling. We meet live twice a week. You meet with Cassandra or Ray or myself in the homeroom such class on Sunday. And then we all our classes are grouped together in what's called study hall on Wednesday night. And the goal for study hall is to help people with critiquing or whatever they're working on, to help them make it better. I refer to it as art triage. Is how can you help this individual with whatever assignment they're working on. We are connected in Discord. This is a huge thing. Imagine that you have 2-3 hour meeting live sessions a week, and then you're connected to somebody or your mentor all week long where you can ask them a question in Discord. And then we bring in a group of speakers. Specifically, we always bring one. We've started that and we're going to continue it. We always bring one gallery director in. And then we bring a group of artists, of 6 artists that relate to our whole program. 3 of them are illustrators and painters. And 3 of them come from the concept side. So this is what Discord looks like. And this, I have hundreds, thousands of these to pull from. And I thought this was such a great example from Cassandra's class. This is somebody showing process, the way they potentially are going to make a picture. And then right below it, you have Cassandra's response. And that's how Discord, how this works, is that you're not sitting around waiting for the live session. You can get a response back, generally in 24 hours. And, we like to minimum have a response in between the live classes. So you have contact with your instructor 4 days a week. You will get to know your instructors. You'll have a lot of interaction with them. And then on the guest speaker side, I showed this slide before because it amazes me. It just absolutely amazes me.
So cool. It's so
Every
cool.
semester we have 6 iconic artists come into our program and talk about their path. They're in there for 3 hours explaining how they do, how they've gotten to where they are, their history, what they do in the industry, and they generally make something. They generally do some type of demonstration that we find that they think the students will find useful. Zoe Frank, unbelievable painter. Cannot wait to somebody I don't know. I'm looking forward to getting to know. Wesley Burt. If you're a character designer in the concept world, and you don't know Wesley Burt, that's a problem. The guy is amazing. Carlo Ortiz, they're absolutely amazing artists, all of them. Drew Tucker, Iris Compete, and Jeremy Collins. They're all successes in different parts of the industry. And I think I get back to what I was saying. It's really important that we share with you people that are doing it, actively making work now. And then Clint Manziel, you can say something about Clint, Ray. You introduced me.
Yep. Clint Mansell is the gallery director over at Principal Gallery in Alexandria, Virginia, which is a major contemporary representational gallery in in the States, in the country, and hosts a lot of incredible artists. And Clint was gracious enough to come in and give insight into how he approaches artists and the gallery, and that the artist gallery relationship, and how to best navigate it. And that's, again, like,
It's a gold mine.
Cassandra, yeah, it's a goal line, and that's exactly what you had last semester or last year with Eva, is that that insight is priceless, because you could
Ray,
imagine not knowing that.
Yeah, imagine what I was saying about the difficulty and of communicating with the gallery director. Everybody says, "Oh man, they don't want to talk to me. They're so hard to talk to." They come into the program, and for 3 hours, you can sit and have a conversation with them, and it really helps demystify that what a gallery is trying to do. And somebody like Clint and Eva, you realize they are not that stereotype at all. They're very willing, open, want to talk to you.
Yeah, because it makes
sorry.
No, but one thing I was going to say about Clint is that he's a big believer in, if he's able to explain where he's coming from, what to do, it makes the artist, he's helping improve the artist gallerist sort of relationship, and make it easier for artists to communicate. And because if communication is better, then everyone wins. And I think that's super important to get that information, and you're going to get it with this gallery series, with the guest speaker series. Sorry, Cassandra, didn't mean to.
Oh no, I was just going to say, like in a week, one of the galleries that represents me is Glave Kosin, and Jen Glave is going to come talk, and she has such a heart for emerging artists and has worked with tons of fantastic artists like Stephen Walker, who's just a rock star, and she
Academy student.
Yeah. And she was just so kind and generous in like explaining everything and making sure that I am looking for more galleries and expanding and not being taken for granted, and having somebody being willing to help like prepare you for the gallery world is unbelievably rare and generous. So like these are it's such exciting people to have come talk, like Eva and Clint and Jen. Like this is something that I was dying to find when I didn't know what to do when I started out.
Yeah, and the quality of guest speakers, it just in a single semester is incredible. We were just talking for like maybe in my 4 years at school, in grad school, I had that high quality, like that amount of talent speaking at in total, and you're getting all of that in a single semester. So, and John, also the one thing I wanted to ask was, are the gallery students able to also look at or listen to the concept art?
Yeah, they get all. They get the other 6. They have all 7 speakers are available to them.
So, like, just think about that too. I do illustration and gallery work, and it's a big world out there, and everyone's a unique individual. And so being exposed to different types of artists, especially across disciplines, I mean, it's so huge, because you just don't know until you see it.
It makes your brain start turning, because you see Carl Ortiz, who's known for character design and doing these beautiful work for the fantasy world, but she also is represented in gallery. She does book covers, she does keyframe work for the concept world for Marvel and these major IPs. Zoe Frank, she's going to be talking to the illustration program. And the gallery, you know, she's a gallery painter. People, Jeremy Collins does more than one thing, you know, finding, you know, seeing that people can do, they can, you know, cross polarize their their career with different directions. I think it's very helpful to see how others do it. Well, listen, I want to thank both of you for doing this talk with me today. I am so happy you're both teaching in our program. I feel like I have the right team together to make this work. And thank you so much for everything you put into the program. And I really appreciate it. I appreciate this, you taking the time this afternoon to talk about it. So thank you.